Welcome to the Echo and Athena podcast, where authenticity drives real change. I'm your host, Brian John, and together we'll explore stories and strategies to help you embrace your true self and make a lasting impact. Ready to get started? Let's go. Welcome to the Echo and Athena podcast today. We have a rad guest with us. Katy Oberle is a licensed marriage and family therapist turned creative mindfulness coach. She is a singer-songwriter, performer. She creates creative mindfulness programming to individuals, groups, and organizations to help them manage stress, enhance connection, access self-compassion, gratitude, wonder, creativity, and joy. She is also co-founder of the Bee Sanctuary, a new mindfulness-based wellness community in Upper Arlington, Ohio, as well as the senior artist in residence at Ohio Health Cancer Care Centers, providing vocal and guitar music, sound baths to patients and their families. She is a resident of Columbus, Ohio, with her husband and two daughters, a friend, a colleague, a compassionate voice for our world. Ladies, gentlemen, all of our friends out there, Katy Oberle. Katy, thank you for being a part of the podcast.
Hi, friend. Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here, and thanks for what you're doing in the world. This is awesome.
You are most welcome, and thank you for what you are doing in the world. And Katy and I go back a couple years. We met through our local chamber of commerce, and she has just such an amazing story and has such diverse talents. And she authentically shows up by bringing all of that together through her coaching, performing, and helping others along with their journey here in life. And our first question to Katy is really, the essence. Who are you and how did you get here?
Yeah. Well, I ask myself that on a regular basis. And I think that's, quite a doozy of a first question, but just because you're a friend, I'll take a stab at it. So I, I was looking over, you were gracious enough to send me some ideas about the questions that you might have been asking me ahead of time. So I had a chance to kind of think about these. And, I wrote down for this one that I am a creative soul with a sensitive heart and a big imagination who loves the arts, especially music, loves animals, who just wants people to be kind to each other, who loves my family, and who wants people to find peace within their own hearts, and sort of has spent a career trying to help support people in doing that. So how I got here, I always think about in certain, you're a therapist or therapist in training, friend, so you'll understand that, the element of self-disclosure and how much do we share about ourselves in what context. So I thought a lot about that too, about what I wanted to share and how I wanted to share it. And speaking about authenticity, I wanted to be able to share things that might help others feel seen, help others feel like they are not hearing a perfect person speaking these things, that they're hearing a human who has gone through some things and is just trying to show up every day in the best way she knows how. Oh, but it's going to make me emotional.
Hell yeah, you're striking the chord
Yeah.
already, my friend.
Yeah. So a big part of all of, me getting here has really been a journey through my own trauma history. And despite the quakiness of my voice, I really have gotten to quite an amazing place in my healing from that. But I think it's still very vulnerable to talk about, especially because it involves people I love. And that trauma happened to me in the context of my family when I grew up. And my dad, even though he was an amazing person in so many respects, did struggle with alcohol. And I was the second of two kids, and I was 11 years younger than my older brother. And I, as I've already said, it was a creative soul with a sensitive heart and into the arts. And that was kind of a mismatch with, I think, the skills and talents and interests that my dad had. And so I don't think he wanted to understand me. I don't think he necessarily ever really did. And then unfortunately, as we know, alcoholism is progressive, right? It's a progressive disease. And so that it progressed through my childhood and in my formative years. And so, as a therapist myself, I've studied trauma. I know a lot about it. And it affects your sense of self. So even that question, who are you, has been really difficult to wrap my arms around at different points in my life. And every once in a while, it still is. When I sort of, get on shaky ground related to what's going on in my world at any given moment. So that being said, I then had this sort of craving, I think, to find myself and to engage with people that I felt could really see me. And I think that was my authentic self, like coming through in those moments. And I think that's why I gravitated towards musical theater and weird theater kids. Like they accept you, because everyone's a weirdo. It is such like this amazing community of just creative thinkers, and that's when I started to meet, my first encounters with LGBTQ people, and really just felt like, wow, there are so many ways to do life that is not the ways that I sort of was programmed to do in my family. And so it was sort of this internal splitting of how I felt like I kind of had to show up in my life, kind of as the perfect girl, the perfect student. That ended up manifesting in anorexia and self-injury. And, but all of that was like stuff that I was doing to myself to keep me. It was a very, I think, I don't know. I thought it was a pretty inventive way to emotionally survive my family situation. It just wasn't very sustainable or healthy for me in the long term. So, I survived it all.
Sure.
But I definitely had to learn some different ways to cope with my big emotions, because I didn't necessarily feel like it was okay to show those big emotions. Someone already had the big emotions in our family, and I didn't get to have space with mine. So I think that's also what sent me off in the path to want to go into marriage and family therapy, of any type of therapy, because I really felt the impact of dysfunctional relational dynamics in my family. And so I think I just was gravitating towards a lens in therapy of seeing everything as systems, right? And relationships, because none of us exist in a vacuum. And so I really loved learning about relationships. And, all the while, like I remember even in grad school, I had to write a paper about my family of origin dynamics and everything. Like, we got into it on the self of the therapist stuff. And, I think I just was able to split still, in the sense of like, I was cognitively processing all of this, even into adulthood. And then I moved away, and, I wasn't at home for several years. And then about 9 years ago, we moved back to Ohio. My dad was still living, and we were back into like literally my hometown, like down the street. And all that old stuff came up because I had to interact with him all the time. And, as people know, in alcoholic families, sometimes they're good and sometimes they're bad. And you don't necessarily know when the bad times are coming, but you know that they're coming. So you brace for those. And it's a whole screwy nervous system situation. So really in my life, I've been in a state of like hypervigilance,
Hmm.
always trying to just be ready for that shoe to drop. Loud noises scare me. My most recent therapist that I'll talk about in a little bit ended up just diagnosing me with PTSD and complex PTSD and depression and anxiety. Like, wow, I should get a punch card or something and like a free smoothie. Um, so many things. So, I mean, I guess I didn't really think that it rose to the level of PTSD stuff because even though I had learned about it in grad school and all of that, that hey, this does happen from relational trauma, I guess I never felt like, I was that traumatized, right? I was never
Right.
hit. I was never, like anything like that. And so I really tried to sort of like in my mind still explain it as, well, there's something wrong with me. I just need to work on my emotional regulation skills. I just need to blah, 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 blah. And I was sort of, I don't think it was intentional on their part, but I was sort of like sacrificed at the altar of the therapy gods, right? Where it's like, going through therapy as a young kid, it was pretty much me. Like I was the IP, the identified patient, right? And even going on into adulthood, individual therapy, all the things. So that can happen a lot in families like that. And so that was another reason that I really enjoyed working in a marriage and family therapy. But it really started to be the slow snowballing effect of re-traumatization, right? Because then my nervous system was encountering these families as clients who were very dysregulated and who had some of these indicators of, maybe some substance abuse in their family, or certainly these intergenerational traumas, these, conflict. And I was sort of holding all of this as a therapist does, right? With therapeutic distance and having consultation and supervision and all those things. But um, I just don't think I allowed myself to really say out loud, this is re traumatizing.
Hmm.
Like, I'm a really good therapist because I am so hyper vigilant and I care so much that I have very high emotional intelligence and I am a very compassionate person. And so I am a great therapist. I am.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that it's great for me. And it was a time when about 3 years ago now, that I came home I was working at a private practice at that point, a group private practice. And I had seen like 4 couples that day, which is kind of the max of what I would see, just because couples are very, very intense.
Mhm.
And had I had been having these migraines and they just got more and more. And I'd never had migraines before in my life. But in the past few months at that position, I had started getting migraines. And then I I got a panic attack. And so I like I'm driving home with this like semi panic attack, horrible migraine going on. My mother-in-law is at home with our girls. I like make them turn the lights off. I'm laying on the couch. They're like over top of me, like, oh my God, like, are you having like what's going on with you? Like, are you having a medical
Mhm.
emergency? And I was like, what is happening? This is not okay. Hard stop. Like, we need to circle the wagons and figure out what is going on. So how I got here to what
Mm.
I'm doing now is in a direct relationship with that story, long story that I just told you, because that then was the moment that really I had to decide to make, as they call in therapy, a second order change, right? I had changed some sort of first order things around, what practice I was working in and my hours and this and this and this. But I needed to really do like a full scale reevaluation of how I was living my life and how I was attending to my healing
Mm.
and my well being. So there you go.
It was amazing because when we first met and we talked about that you were a marriage and family therapist, and I asked why, essentially the question was, why aren't you doing that now? And you just left it at, well, it was time for a change and I felt like I was burning out. Um, but what was really interesting and I think thought provoking, emotion provoking about your story and what you just shared was we have a way in culture of taking things that are in a vacuum and as a concept good, and then creating this toxicity because we over apply it. And so that idea of comparison culture, no matter what you went through, you were saying, well, it's not as bad as someone else's. And it's kind of like that internal voice that says, shut up, be grateful. And then there's this grateful culture that we've over applied to just say, just shut up and be grateful for what you got. And when your soul is calling out for attention
Yeah.
and we don't
Absolutely.
listen and we apply those concepts to mute it,
Yeah.
the soul won't be denied and the body won't be denied. It will get to the level to where if you don't pay attention, it will wreck everything around you. And would you say that that was fair in that whole process of changing, that those two concepts played a big role?
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. And so I always make sure now when I talk, because I do work with gratitude, and I do like gratitude art, art journaling and talks on gratitude. And I always make sure to talk about gratitude shaming, because other people can do that to us and we can do it to ourselves too. Like, I should be grateful, or
Yes.
messages in childhood, our parents saying, well, you should be grateful for because blah 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 blah. And that's just not it's just not how it works. It just shames the person. And so I think, yeah, I had a lot of shame that um I was still struggling, even though I had all of these resources. I literally had expertise in this skill set of therapy, and like, how come I couldn't get my shit together, for lack of a better term, right?
Yeah.
um, and and it felt really, and then I felt guilty that I was leaving, like, colleagues on the battlefield, so to speak. Like, I was like, I should fight, I keep fighting the good fight and still, be a therapist. I've gone to school for this, I worked so hard for this, and so much of my identity was wrapped up in it,
Hmm.
the who I was.
Yeah.
And that was a really difficult journey to kind of unravel me from my profession that I had been doing up until that point. And then
Yeah.
still, and then also try to derive, what are what were the trauma triggers that I just sort of like said were my personality, like, like empathic listening. Yeah, but like also with a sprinkle of hypervigilance, right? So I mean,
Mhm.
it just was a lot of untangling and looking at things. And that's really what brought me into mindfulness work, because I had to get quiet with myself, because, like you just said, my body was like screaming at me. It had been giving me messages quietly. And then it was like, okay, well, we're going to give you a really sucky migraine now and a panic
Mhm.
attack. And like, listen, are you listening yet? And finally, I was like, okay, I'm listening. I'm listening. I don't know what is going on, but I'm ready to kind of put pause on everything so I can figure that out. And so I think that's how sometimes people come into mindfulness, honestly, right? Is a life crisis. I don't recommend it as a way to go into learning mindfulness. I don't ask that of my clients. That's not how we first start, our work together. But that's how a lot of people come in, right? With this sort of like existential crisis. Um, and a lot of, I think, sometimes there's this intergenerational trauma piece that goes along with it, because we also are unraveling strands of things
Mhm.
that aren't us, but that have been handed down to us.
Yeah.
And so that term, this term cycle breaker, has been something that I've just been really working on committing to. And on days where I'm like, I don't want to have my therapy appointment because it makes me so emotional. And I come out and I have puffy eyes and I feel like I've just run a marathon, but I commit to it because I'm a cycle breaker. I got to walk that walk. I've got to be in alignment with my values. I need to show up authentically in the work that I do in mindfulness work. And I I have tried the perfect girl version of what I'm doing in my business, and I can still slip into her once in a while. and it feels really gross and I don't like it.
Mm.
And so I continue to have to check myself, and that's mindfulness, right? Okay, ooh, like didn't feel great. Why didn't it feel great? And anytime we're, investigating any aspect of our internal process, we're engaging in mindfulness. And so mindfulness is definitely not synonymous with relaxation. So sometimes that's the first sort of myth I have to, demystify for people or debunk for people that just want to sort of relax. And can't I use mindfulness to relax? And sometimes it's sort of a side effect. It can be relaxing because you're, kind of like getting more still and breathing a little, a little slower. But a lot of times what you're left with is being alone with your thoughts. And if they're a hot mess, then that's sure not going to feel very relaxing. But it's sort of what has to happen to get to the insight part so you can understand what's going on, and then to have clarity, and then to be able to make mindful, informed decisions about how to move forward with all of that data.
So when you're in that mode though, where you feel like the perfect person or the perfect girl mentality is coming in and you become aware of it, which that's the first key, right? You become aware of the cycle, you become aware of the shift within yourself. What
Mhm.
works best for you when it comes to, okay, I'm aware of this right now, and I think we all have that perfect self kind of screaming at us sometimes of we're not doing it right. How do you deal with that and realign yourself in specifics?
Well, I will tell you, and I wish that well, I was going to say, I wish that I could do it all by myself, but that would be pretty lonely. And I don't do it all by myself. I have a very loving partner. And I mean, it was really the other day, like I had that scenario and he's like,
Mm,
you need to take a walk. Like you need to go outside and take a walk.
mm,
And I was like, but I have to do this and this and this and this. He's like, you're spinning right now and you need to take a walk. So like I knew that I was feeling icky. I knew that I was spinning. I get really stubborn and entrenched in like the way that I think I'm going to solve the problem. Um, and that's not the way to solve the problem. It just
mhm.
takes me in further. And sometimes I have to come to that realization myself. And then sometimes that means I have to come back later and repair with somebody. And yeah, I've had a lot of reparative conversations with my husband, and thank goodness he's stuck around and hopefully isn't keeping track because it would be a little imbalanced, I think. But he reminds me to do the things he's like, do the things that you teach to other people.
Mhm.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, yeah. And so I just want people to know, like, it's so hard to do sometimes, right? It's hard to
Mhm.
just remember to do it, even when we are feeling good, because that really can like prime the pump. And that's obviously when we want to be able to practice doing it so that it can be an easier resource for us. But even for someone who like does a lot of this stuff, in daily life, because I'm teaching it, I'm doing the activities, I'm going to yoga, like I'm doing the things. I still have moments where like, yeah, I'm getting triggered. I'm feeling like maybe I responded in a way that just didn't feel super in alignment with who I was or how I wanted to show up, or and so, in the aftermath of this most recent example of that, I've had to I think what I've needed and eventually got is, yeah, time where I was outside. Nature really, really helps.
Mhm.
Helps calm the nervous system. It helps my mind um, float to where it's going to float to. And then I can observe where it's going and then kind of come to some conclusions about that. So I think one of the things was that I wasn't on my home turf, so to speak. And like I felt like I didn't know what to expect. And when I'm in scenarios that there's sort of this unknown factor, um, my control tendencies really come online. And the way that I control is I try to again kind of be the perfect whatever for that scenario, rather than maybe slowing down, saying I need a break, going outside, recentering myself, and coming back kind of in that scenario. So I think now I at least can forgive myself and have that self-compassion about, hey, this was a lesson learned. And when I think back to how I behaved, I can really say, look, I was doing my best given the circumstances in the moment.
Absolutely.
And now I understand why that was and why I behaved that way. And so now I can try, if another scenario like that presents itself, I can try another way. I can try a
Mhm.
more mindful response.
And to me, that's like the litmus test, if you will, of the health of a relationship, the help of the people in the relationship, whether it's intimate, whether it's friendships, regardless of the level that it is we're going to make mistakes. We're going to behave in ways that are not congruent with who we are, who we're becoming. Do we have that humility to hear what the person who cares about us is saying? And does the person who is sharing it, are they aware enough and humble enough to come from not the angry space, but from the understanding, loving space and communicating space of here's how this is impacting me, and then giving each other a chance to repair or
Yeah,
to continue to grow together or to have that space of, yeah, we're not perfect, but we're perfect for each other
right,
type
right. And
situation.
I think
And
like the proof is in the pudding. Like he knows, like I show him that I'm working on it by continuing to go to therapy, to like, trying to repair, to like have, sometimes I'll look at him and I'll just be like, let the record show that 6 months ago, I would have responded this way, but right now I'm doing this. Are you recognizing my progress? Like I still need like the gold star, but I just want him to know, because it's so hard for me, because
yes.
I am like, like with a machete in this like jungle of my mind. Over here is the
Mm,
super highway of like all the neural pathways that I have like run, gone down over my lifetime. And I don't need to even, that's why it's still my MO. Like that's
yeah.
the automatic pilot. So over here, it is like this, scary, bug infested, journey. It doesn't feel good. And so I just need him to know I'm trying really hard and there's no guide in the jungle. It is just me. And please like know that I'm working on it. And I know that
That
I'm being horrible right now, but at least if you hear this, like meta analysis of why I'm horrible, maybe it'll help you understand and forgive me a little more.
that might be one of the best descriptions I have ever heard regarding the creation of new behaviors, new neural pathways, new ways of interpreting the
Mm,
circumstances. Um, because as much as you have folks in your life who are saying, go, you got this, we support you, we love you, you are alone in the bug infested, weedy, thicket ridden jungle with a machete trying to find the right way. And the only director in all of that is you, your internal knowing. And let's also, not pretend like all the folks who are cheering us on in that, they're not going through that journey. And I
right.
don't think you were, but just
No, no.
those
I mean,
listening,
I was being
they're
slightly
going,
hyperbolic, but yes, no.
yeah, but they're cheering us on as they're doing their own.
Right.
And
Right.
so we're all kind of yelling back and forth in the
That's
jungle per
right.
se, like, you can do this. Oh, this really sucks as I'm working through
That's
the crazy
right.
ways of living.
That's right. That's right.
That
Yeah.
was right, dead on. And, you
And
know,
sometimes I feel like I'm walking through a cleared path, right? And then I encounter a thicket and I'm like, oh, well, I didn't know that was going to be there. And those are still those sort of little like, sometimes they're just smaller triggers that still happen. Again, I'm using trigger as sort of like a general term. And most of us, I think it's enough of a, a common saying in our culture that, maybe what I'm saying, but trigger in sort of the therapeutic sense as it relates to trauma is really any reminder of your trauma experience. So it can be a sound, it can be someone's facial expression, it can be any sort of a sense memory.
Yeah.
It can be so many things. And it usually is really pretty like it's like that 6 degrees of separation, 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, whatever the game is, right? Where it's like, how do I connect the dots from this trigger to actually like what it was? Because I know that it, and those are the things that like confuse the heck out of my husband. He's like, well, I don't understand why you got upset. And I'm like, well, I don't know either. I'm trying to figure it out. I'll ask my therapist on Tuesday.
Yeah.
But mindfulness and the things that I do now in my business, like these are activities, mindfulness tools that I have found incredibly helpful for myself to do, both on my own and in community, that help me connect those dots, that help
Yeah.
me, walk a path that is not so scary, even if it is the unknown. I guess walking it in such a way where I'm feeling grounded, where I'm taking intentional steps, where I'm really thinking about, okay, do I turn left or do I turn right? And I'm not reacting, right? So yeah, those are, some of, to continue the metaphor, and maybe I'm like talking in too
No,
much
you're good. You're good.
in a not, I don't know, straightforward way. But yeah, I think that it's been a trial by fire, and I don't want it to have to be that way for everyone. So I want to be able to create spaces and opportunities for people to dip their toes into mindfulness, to not feel like it has to be a certain way, look a certain way. Kind of this, there's such a beautiful buffet of options, right? Depending on kind of on any given day or personality wise, kind of like how you want to interface with it.
And I gotta say, one of the parts about how you're approaching this that not only do I admire and appreciate, but has also served as an example as I'm going through my mental health counseling program. There's a lot of people who call themselves coaches out there who are either mindfulness coaches, meditation coaches, well being coaches, emotional well being, those types of things. And I know I'm going to upset people with what I'm about to say, but it's something I truly believe. You cannot go to a weekend seminar, come out of that, and say, now I'm trauma informed. You cannot go to a conference and walk out of there saying, oh, I really understand what people are going through. And a lot of coaches work with a client and they find the trauma or they find the triggers and they wade into an area that they are absolutely not equipped to help the person they're working with. And so there's lots of stories out there, people who are leadership coaches, life coaches, whatever the case may be, where they have waded into this water with someone and as opposed to bridging then support to work with a therapist, they don't want to lose the client. So then they end up, going to a seminar and say, well, I'm trauma informed and help people. But you are one of the folks who have come out of understanding the power of therapy, the power of counseling, the specificity on the techniques being used to help people. And you are bridging this into the mindfulness space, which is, one of the most unique aspects of working with you, because you not only bring that, but you also go beyond traditional practices. You don't just talk about, well, let's start a gratitude journal, although that may be one of the tools you use. You're teaching people about forest bathing, you're teaching people about soul collage, and you're bringing true expertise and authenticity of your story to this space, which is uniquely powerful. And if you wouldn't mind, just kind of share with us a little bit about how you came across these tools, how they really have helped either you or how you see them impacting clients. And if you wouldn't mind, let's start with forest bathing. How did you come across that, and how is that impactful for the people you work with?
How did I come? I think that yeah. I think I encountered it I did my training up in this place in Kent, Ohio called Shine. And that was what I did my training for sound sound bath, sound healing. I still don't know what to call. I mean, I don't call it sound healing because I'm not confident that I'm healing anyone or that's my job with this.
The
It
sound
is
experience.
right, sound experience. But I did my training there, and they had a Shinrin-yoku forest bathing training. Shinrin-yoku is the Japanese phrase that means bathing in the air of the forest. And it's an evidence-based practice that really has been, especially in the last couple decades in Japan, there's been millions of dollars kind of put towards research on the evidence for how forest bathing can benefit you psychologically, emotionally, and definitely physically. So I was like, well, in another life, I was pretty sure I was going to be a Disney princess in the parks. I totally identify with, Snow White singing to the birds. I have a bluebird tattoo on my shoulder. I like talk to animals on the regular. I feel so calm and at peace in nature. My husband would, slightly joke with me on that because he said, you're kind of like a theoretical hiker. Like you love that in theory, but then when you know there might be snakes around, like you just freak out, freak out. So I like that I can go do forest therapy in like a very tiny controlled little forest space in Upper Arlington. I do it at Smith Nature Park. And I haven't seen a snake yet, but I'm sure I would just try to wish them well in any case, and then get the hell out of there. But I just really loved the idea of how they presented it. I was like, well, let me just do this training anyway. Like, let me just learn what this is, do it for myself, experience it, because I'm pretty sure I've done this kind of thing my whole life. But so that in that way, I did kind of do a training and then I like could do it. And there are much more, intensive trainings that you could do, especially if I were like in the mountains of Colorado, then I really would have needed some wilderness training for that one. But the practice is so simple that you can do it anywhere, any outdoor space. It can literally be in your backyard or when you're going on a walk. But it is lovely to have a forested area with a water element. That's why I also like Smith Nature Parks that has a little creek. But the idea is that the forest is the therapist, that the guide just sort of opens the door to that experience, holds the container, this psychologically safe container, yes, this trauma-informed container, but gives some suggestions for invitations that someone might encounter in the forest related to their senses and related to the different earth elements. So air invitations might be watching the leaves flutter in the wind. Water invitations might be watching, the babbling brook. Ground invitations, earth invitations, it might be like taking your shoes off and earthing, right? There are many benefits of that, but also getting down and like watching the ants and interacting. There's the idea of reciprocity when you're engaging in forest bathing. So, you give thanks for the trees because they give you so much shade and oxygen and protection and paper, like whatever, and you're receiving and you're giving. So you receive all those things, you're giving thanks, you're giving appreciation. So I just think it's a different way than most people interact with nature. Usually we're walking from point A to point B in nature. We're taking our dog for a walk, or we're like trying to get our steps in, or, we're maybe enjoying the trees, but we're really not like mindfully immersing ourselves in that experience. And it has just been so, so beautiful for me to experience it and to watch others have these sometimes very simple realizations, but they're deep and they're authentic and they're meaningful around interconnection, shifting their perspective of like what really matters, maybe shifting their perspective around even how they treat the world around them, and related to kind of ecotherapy, climate consciousness, so and care for animals, so many things.
So I'm not going to hold you to this answer, but if you were to guess, why does that do that? Why does it help people get to that place to where they find a deeper authenticity in who they are and the connection to the world? Do you have a guess as to, or maybe even factually?
Yeah, I didn't bring my bucket of research today, so I don't have things memorized. I do know, I mean, there's a whole thing about like the color green and there's all these studies about the evidence of why that is really a thing. So maybe we can follow up and I can give you some of that information. But I think some other elements at play are we're off our screens.
Mm,
We're out of man-made territory. So there's
yeah.
not, we're not like looking at the Starbucks or, like cars driving by. Now, in the place that I do it in Upper Arlington, we're kind of right off the road. So you can, if you really wanted to look through the tree line and see cars, and you can definitely hear them. So I invite people to see if they can shift their attention from man-made sounds to nature sounds.
Mm,
And most people have a pretty easy time of that, because once we decide what to shift our attention to, and find that it's restorative, we want to stay there.
yeah.
So I think in nature, like a tree doesn't expect us to do anything, to be anybody. Like we don't have to compare ourselves. Every tree is doing its own thing. They're not comparing themselves to each other. We are not, kind of like running down our to-do list about all the things we have going on. And we're not really even like interacting with others in sort of that like superficial kind of a way that we do. Like, hey, how's your day? Like, how's it going? Yeah, life's pretty good, staying busy. Like, you're really just a part of nature, because we are nature.
Mm,
And we're
mm,
mammals. Like, we realize that like we don't belong inside sitting down looking at screens all day. That is like not how we're made to connect and to interact with this beautiful earth. And I think that if we did that more, we would have so much more respect for it. We would treat animals more compassionately. We would treat forests and all sorts of climate situations with more care. I just don't think that um, it's capitalistically productive to do that.
mhm.
So we don't do it.
Yeah. There's something about the lack of expectation from nature on us
Right.
that allows what, once you kind of start, it could be very loud in your head and it could be very difficult to get to that spot to where you're like, I'm going to give myself whatever time it takes to slow down and to just be here. And what is ultimately powerful about that is, in my opinion, twofold. One, the connection with nature and how it's soothing us, if you will, and us being a part of it, I think does the same back. But also, when we are slowing down, we get more in touch with who we are
Yes.
and we stop trying to perform
Yep.
for society at large, and whether it's job or expectations or whatever. And so that's where we can find some of our authenticity, is
Yeah.
just in that space and seeing. A lot of times people go into nature to realize how small we are.
Yes. And it's
And
like that. It's not like I don't know, it's scary
mhm,
sometimes to feel that small, but it's also like refreshing to feel that small. Like that really the world does not revolve around us. The things that
mhm,
we are griping about and think that it's the end of the world, it really isn't.
yeah,
Um, and not that we have to be, kind of pithy or flippant about other people's pain or even our
No.
pain, but the idea that like, yes, there is so much going on in this world that like is just going on, right? The
Mhm.
seasons continue to change.
Yeah.
The sun continues to rise and to set, and there is, yeah, this comfort in like stability, equanimity around just sort of like being, stable in the face of all this change. Like nature is that. So you kind of get a little bit of of, of it by osmosis, I think, when you're there.
Yeah. And we're in it, we're small, but we're not insignificant.
Right.
And so by being small, we are a part of, as opposed to carrying the weight of the entire world on our shoulders as we're moving forward. And, I've consistently heard the impact of forest bathing and earthing and really getting into the science of all of it, going down to the electrons
Right.
and how that's exchanged and the ions. And this is, I know some people think this stuff can be woo, but it's very scientific. As our technology has increased, our knowledge has increased as to why these
Hmm.
are
Hmm.
beneficial
Right.
things.
And I sort of, it depends on the audience. Sometimes I have to kind of pull out the research depending on who my crowd is, because they are, not maybe anti woo woo, but they're just, they want facts. They're analytic people. And if that's what's needed to get them on board to try this, great.
Mhm.
But I mean, I try not to get in the way of this experience too much. I try to
Yes.
just sort of set the table and have people experience it. And then
Yeah.
your body will tell you. You
Mhm.
will know it was this helpful or not. And
Yeah.
no, no amount of evidence or not evidence needs to like then convince you, because you had the experience.
Yes. And that makes it worth it. And I think what's important a lot of times is I heard someone say one point in time, tools are great in managing our lives, our stresses, things like that, but oftentimes they work until they don't.
Mhm.
But there are certain tools, experiences that seem to consistently work. And it seems to be those tools and experiences that extend outside of what we need to do. And it's the interaction with nature, it's the interaction with sound and vibration. And I want to ask you a question regarding the sound bath experience, because I think there's a famous quote by Einstein who talks about the medicine of the future will be found in frequency and vibration.
Yeah.
And I've had some sound experiences, and I know that listening to things like birds, the frequency of bird song, very specific bird song, or of nature sounds, or of the ocean, um, also the frequency of the sound bowls, things like that, have a penetrative experience that can help us. Binaural beats, the list goes on and on. Tell me about your experience in getting into the use of sound bath and how that has helped people along the
Yeah.
way?
I mean, it was really just all the things that you said around like experiencing the benefits of that, like by just going to, I didn't know what it was for a while, and someone had introduced me to it, and I went. I'm like, I couldn't even tell you the first one I went to, but I knew then that I like tried a couple more. They were all a little different, because everybody kind of uses, a variety of different instruments. The bowls are kind of the foundational core of a lot of sound baths. They don't have to be, but some people use Himalayan kind of, the metallic bowls, and I use quartz crystal bowls. But there's gongs, there's chimes, there's all these types of kind of tonal vibrational instruments. There's ocean drums that are sort of like rain sticks. Uh,
Mhm.
and for me, I just really found that it was this very compassionate, like self compassionate act that was a gentler way for me to meditate, because I wasn't sitting on this desk on this little cushion, sort of, in, like, again, perfect meditator position, setting my alarm, like doing the thing, because I was going to try to be like, Buddha-esque. And I mean, I've gone to a couple like weekend silent retreats. Like I've sat for like, 45 minutes at a time, and then you get up and you walk 20 minutes, you sit another 45 minutes, and you walk and you sit, and you walk and you sit, and then you hear a Dharma talk, which is sort of like a Buddhist sermon. Then you go to bed and you do the same thing again the next day. And that's all beautiful. And I give so much, I have so much gratitude and appreciation, and humility, around the lineage of Buddhism and all um, that lineage has brought to me. And I exist not in a monastery, in the modern world, in the body and the experiences that I have, in a body that has been through trauma, that gets real jacked up when it's told to do things a certain way and things are rigid around that. It feels a little stifling. It can feel anxiety provoking. And to a point, I'll do that to stretch my window of tolerance. And I know that, it's exposure therapy. I can kind of try it. But to what end? Like, do I need to keep trying to do that just to say that I do that? I also wrestled with a little shame about that, because again, as a creative mindfulness coach, for whatever that means, right? Like well, I should have a daily meditation practice where I'm like sitting on a cushion, and I have a friend who does that and he's a mindfulness coach. Well, if he does it, then I should do it. But then I'm like, okay, if I'm being honest about this, what can I justify that is actually meditation for me?
Mm-hmm.
Songwriting is meditation for me. Listening to music is meditation for me. Being in a sound bath is meditation for me. Mindfully being in nature is meditation for me. Engaging in a soul collage session is meditation for me. There's so many flavors of it. And so I guess I wanted to give myself permission, and it just felt so much more freeing and spacious and nourishing to be able to shift my perspective that way. Again, kind of second order change. And I wanted to bring that to people. And,
Yeah.
again, not to detract from the practice of formal meditation, but I am not a meditation teacher. Like, I'm not going to know all of the ins and outs of every form of meditation and how to teach you to do these. I really want you to be able to creatively integrate mindfulness into your daily life. That's my jam.
Yeah. I love that. And you mentioned, and I got to have just a little taste of this the first time we were at Bee Sanctuary, but you talked about soul collage.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that is something that I'm so curious about. And I know people who have done it have come out saying just a wow. They have that wow experience. And there's something very introspective about it. There's something that allows you to acknowledge all the parts of who you are. And I think that goes with your idea around meditation. Like, this is right for this coach who teaches mindfulness, but also that's how it works for them. But what does your daily process work for you? I'm a big believer in I have to be authentic in what I'm doing. And, some days I meditate, some days I don't. And that is the real experience of the people we are serving.
Right.
And so that's why I don't necessarily fight against it. I still feel a little shame around it, but not all the time, because I'm in my head, I'm saying, and in my heart, I need to identify as closely as possible to the people I am serving and helping to uplift, through coaching, just simply by having an authentic experience. So, if you wouldn't mind, can you share like the depth of what soul collage is, how it acknowledges all parts of ourselves,
Yeah.
and how that helps to grow in our own understanding of our own authenticity.
Yeah. Perfect. I also wanted to quickly, I was like, what else do I want to say about the different kind of forms of mindfulness that I do on the regular? And yoga is something I didn't mention, but I do that. And so mindful movement, that is very good for stressed out nervous systems. And it's been such a beautiful journey with the yoga philosophy too, because it does have so many similarities to Buddhist philosophy. And I find a lot of lessons there. I appreciate some of the teachers that I have gone to that really weave in that mindfulness piece in more of kind of a contemplative way and sort of mini little Dharma talk kind of ways. So for anyone that hasn't tried yoga, a plug for the Bee Sanctuary, we really offer very like restorative, accessible yoga there. It's not about, being able to put your leg behind your head or whatever, which I still really want to do because I want to be the perfect yogi. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm better at my internal process. Like that's how it used to be. It's really good for me to observe my internal process when I'm in yoga class because I really get to listen to what my mind is saying, what my thoughts are thinking. Are they compassionate thoughts? Are they judgmental thoughts? Are they ruminative thoughts? How is my body feeling? There's so much that you can use as data from engaging in a mindful movement practice. So I just wanted to put in a plug for that too. I've been through a 100-hour yoga training, and I started a 200, and then I'm like, you know what? I can't do all the things right now. So maybe in the future I'll finish that. But then that allows me to collaborate with some amazing
Yes.
colleagues that are yoga teachers, and I add my flavors of all the skill sets I have, and they add that. And also really interested about Reiki and the
Oh, for
beautiful
sure.
art of that. So goodness, there's so many. But
Yes.
coming back to then soul collage, yeah, soul collage really helps people uncover the authentic parts of themselves by using this intuitive collage making process. So it explores different aspects of your identity and your inner life. Each card that you make, and the cards are like 5 by 8 inches. So, they're bigger than card deck cards, but not as big as like poster board. That's so that you can kind of carry them around with you and about the size of like a journal or something. But they have different categories or suits, like in a card deck. And there's a suit for, it's called community. And this represents sort of the social aspect of our soul. So the people, places that are really nourishing for you. So you can make a card. And again, to make a card for any of these suits, you use curated images. So basically, I cut out images from magazines and leave out all the words. So all that you're left with is just the pictures themselves. And I kind of group them into different categories so you can kind of find what you want in like a soul collage session. There's people, there's places, there's blah, 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 blah. So in a soul collage session, you're looking around and just like, are there any images that are calling to me? You can make a card intuitively, meaning you don't know necessarily what suit it's going to fall into. You're just going to see, ooh, that image calls to me. And then, oh, that image is related to this image. So I'm going to use both of those images because they are both related. And oh, this background, bigger image, that really kind of tells the rest of the story. Yeah, this is all one representative themed card. So it's different than vision boarding because in a vision board, you've got all these different things going on. But every soul collage card is kind of one focused theme. So for example, in the community suit, I have a card for my husband, Ed, and it's one big background image, but it's an image of a mountain with two people hiking on it, and like the one person is helping the other person up the mountain. And that just called to me, and like I wrote a song about him and me a few years back, and I had that mountain imagery in there. It was, I don't know, I'm gonna butcher the words right now, but it called to me, I think on a subconscious level, it was that. And so when you kind of don't have to overanalyze in soul collage
Yeah.
because you're operating at the level of intuition and your subconscious. And so, you can make a card for that wonderful teacher who was a mentor to you, like when you were younger. You can make a card for your pet, a card for, your childhood camp that you went to that you remember fondly. You can make a card for, like, Barack Obama, even if you don't know, like, he doesn't know you, he can be circle of influence. You can make cards in the suit of companion. And these are kind of the somatic aspects of ourselves. So you can make a card for kind of a certain chakra energy, and or an animal spirit that kind of lives in a certain part of your body. So if you can think about kind of like the wise owl in your third chakra, or the bluebird in your heart chakra, or something like that. Sometimes through this type of guided imagery meditation that we do, that might come up. And so that's probably the most esoteric suit, but it's a beautiful one. And then there's the companion. Okay, did that communicate? They're all C. So the council suit. These are archetypal energies. This is kind of the psychological dimension of the soul. So these like kind of big overarching energies, like the warrior, the survivor, the great mother, the joker, the diva. So maybe these are parts of you, but at the same time, they kind of exist larger, kind of in the whole dynamic of our lived experience, kind of globally and historically. So you kind of tap into those energies. And then finally, it's the committee suit. And this is like the psychological, this is more the personality side of the soul. So archetypes and counsel is more spiritual. This is a little bit more psychological. So if anyone is listening and they're a therapist, or you know of internal family systems, that really works a lot with parts. So you can make a card for, gosh, I could make a card for, my perfectionist self, part of myself. I could make a card for my identity as in my vocation. So as a sound bath facilitator, or the part of myself that's a parent, right? A mother. So the idea is that when you make a card, that's part of the process. But then the second part of the process is speaking from the card. So then you hold the card up and you make the statement, I am one who. And then you answer as if the card is answering. So you sort of step into personality of that card's energy. So I'm trained as an actress, so this isn't a jump for me, but for some people this is a little strange, which is okay. So that's why I'm there as a guide to kind of like call you back, because some people end up sort of just describing their card. I picked this image because it reminded me of this. And I say, oh, that's beautiful. Can you try to say, I am one who, and just see what happens? And so then usually they're off and running. And then I am scribing as they do that. I'm writing down what they say. And they might say something like, so say if it's my inner perfectionist card, I am one who really wants to get everything right. I am one who is scared to make a mistake. I am one who, is nervous to really show who I am, because I don't know if people accept me as an imperfect person, right? And so then we can maybe ask some follow-up questions. Well, what does this card, this part of me, need from me? And maybe it just needs to be recognized and not shunned and not shadowed, right? Brought into the light. Maybe it needs our attention and our love, our compassion. But when we do this process, even though I'm a therapist, I am not acting as a therapist, meaning I am not interpreting anyone's cards. And I really, it's an expectation that nobody else is interpreting each other's cards. So there's no psychoanalysis. I do let people know, hey, it sounds like some stuff came up for you. Maybe like this might be a good card to share with your therapist. If you see a therapist, or definitely a card to journal about more, or to kind of get to know a little bit more. But once you have a deck of cards, I mean, even as few as like 5 or 6 cards, you can start maybe kind of like shuffling them, drawing one at random in the morning. And that's sort of like your oracle card or your intention card for the day. So if I pull that Ed card, that husband card, maybe that's just a chance for me to mindfully take a couple minutes and think about him and my relationship with him. Do I need to apologize for being a jerk yesterday in some interaction? What's something nice for him I can do today? What's, what's something that I haven't told him recently around what I appreciate about him, and so it can bring up anything. If you pull a card for kind of a part of yourself that provokes you a bit and that you're maybe a little ashamed of, maybe the message for that day is just like, can you come alongside that part and listen to it rather than try to shove it back down, into the bottomless pit of your subconscious, right? Can you maybe just acknowledge it? And with that acknowledgement, sometimes there is acceptance and softening and compassion that comes. So this is definitely what I've found to kind of wrap up this the question that you asked that put me on a 10-minute explanation.
Perfect.
But I have really, as a facilitator, each time I kind of give examples of cards, and thus I am doing my I am one who for the group, I'm noticing that I'm so much more accepting of all of those parts that I've made cards for, and I'm just I have more ease in talking about them. Shame can only exist in secret. So when you make cards like this and you are putting them out in the universe with a safe group of people in a certain, certain protections and boundaries apply, listening to your own window of tolerance about that. But there just becomes something so powerful and freeing about doing that. And then when you do it in a group, there's so much love and appreciation from everyone else, and sort of just like people's shoulders drop from relief because they feel a lot of the same things, and you just spoke it and you just normalized it.
I will say one of the most powerful experiences, group experiences that I've had was I was in a men's group, and we would essentially like share, what we're struggling with, what we're dealing with, some of the things good that are happening in our world as well. And everyone, I think when we talk about these things, a lot of times they're genderfied. And what I mean by that is this is experience ladies with ladies. But I've actually had that experience. And let me tell you, when I tell you the room of the guys who were in this group, I mean, these were dudes. They were, a lot of them were coaches in the physical wellness space. So they're ripped guys and tatted up and, played ball and all this other stuff. And that is the skill of the facilitator. And that's why I think it's very important to work with someone who knows what they're doing, especially in group scenarios of creating, as you referred, creating the container, creating the environment, the culture of safety for everyone in there. And I'm hearing guys share some of the most vulnerable stuff, which inherently is scary. But then every other guy in that group rallying to them, helping them have the courage to come alongside that part of themselves. And it's truly a powerful experience, not only as you resolve that conflict you have with that part of yourself, but also as other people are showing you how accepting they are of part of that self and how much they appreciate you doing that work. So to anyone listening out there, this definitely is not a feminine thing, a masculine thing, a blended thing. It's a people thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I know they always say, like, I've gotten, business coach advice over the years of like, you got a niche, and like, who is your demographic to that you're going to like market to and do, do your offerings for. And I'm like, I don't know, humans. I mean, I just have never been very good at that, but I think there's a reason for that. That feels authentic to me, to be able to keep the door open.
Yeah.
Set a really, really wide table for anyone who feels like they want to step into any of these practices, because it's not for a certain type of person. It is for anyone.
Yes. And that is the skill of the therapist, the counselor coming in? And I've heard a lot of different explanations. What's the difference between a coach, a therapist, a psychologist, all of that stuff? And I think it's interesting, whoever presents it in a way of theirs is the best. But
Mhm.
I think ultimately, when you think of coach, you got to think more along the lines of how coaches truly exist: technique, directive, and how counselors and therapists exist. It's about the whole experience, the whole person, finding what works for them, helping them unearth and reveal the strength they have, so that they can continue to grow in solving whatever they're working through. And then the psychologist looks at it more from the pathology end of things or the illness end of things. And so all three have their places. But when you take your skill as a therapist and merge it with your skill as a coach, you're bringing something so unique to the table. You're creating the authenticity where someone can be and reveal themselves in safety, while giving them the directive coaching of how to potentially find what works even more so at greater level. So that's why I think, in working with you, um, people will find such expertise and depth of expertise that, of course, it's going to be difficult to say, well, I niche down and I'm just going to work with this group of people. It's probably less about demographics and more about readiness of soul.
Yep. Yep.
And so
Exactly.
people who are ready to allow that, if they're tired of fighting within themselves, would this be an accurate demographic for you? When you're tired of fighting within yourself and you want to find greater self-expression, greater authenticity, and you want more peace, you're not looking to upset the apple cart of your entire life, but you just want a deeper, truer, more authentic experience. That's the person who's a perfect client for you.
Yeah, I want people to be able to um, live in alignment with their values, right? This is my mindful vision boarding workshops are all about this. We do the work around, you know, identifying values first. We go through the motions so often every day, not necessarily operating in direct awareness of like, is this a values aligned decision I'm making in this moment, right? But we can try to do that more. We can try to cultivate that awareness, and we can, vision our year ahead in relation to our values.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what would we be
Mm-hmm.
doing? And who would we be interacting with? And yeah, how would we be showing up if we're showing up in alignment with our values? And so, if people want to step more into that, if they want to be, yeah, more compassionate, kinder, um, you know, more adventurous, uh, any type of kind of self-actualizing, element in somebody's life that they want to step into more. I am not going to take on the role of processing trauma with you because, of course, even though I have that skill set, that's not what I do as a coach.
Right.
But I at least can see that when it pops its head up and then refer you, um,
Yes.
and and celebrate the fact that it's here as something that then you have mindful awareness of, and that is a good thing, even though it doesn't feel good, and that here are some resources so that you can get the care that you need. And a lot of my offerings can really be thought of as adjuncts to therapy, right? They are things that people can be doing between appointments to continue to
Yes.
work on their personal development and their spiritual journey. This can be dialed up or dialed down in terms of how much it relates to your own spiritual journey, but it can be really on just a level of, again, kind of self-actualizing, right? I don't want to just survive. I want to thrive. I want to
Mhm.
not be like, the kitten in the ad that's like hanging in there, right, on the tree limb, right? Like you want to be like this, like beautiful, like kitty on the limb, like cleaning its little paw and just relaxed and like really like loving life.
That's awesome. And it's, that's the thing. You, I can't get the image of the kitty out of my head. But and that's one of the things that it's probably been about 2 years now. I've been saying this to people of, if you don't have a therapist, you should at least have a coach. And, athletes do it, musicians do it, CEOs do it. This is kind of run of the mill for the people who are not, and what I mean, I'm gonna qualify this, who are most successful, not necessarily just in the monetary, material, businessy type things, but they are, what's the phrase, living their best life.
Oh
And
yeah.
it
Like I
doesn't
feel like
have,
I am more successful in my marriage because I have a therapist and
yes,
because I do these other practices, right?
yes,
Like that directly, all of that directly relates to my success in that, and
yes.
as a parent and, as a friend and all of those things. Yeah.
And so and I realize, to get a therapist right now, a counselor, you could be looking up to a 6 month wait.
Yeah.
That's just the reality of the caseload and the amount of need that there is out there. And that's why I say, you should have a counselor or you should have a coach.
Right.
And there should be flexibility in there to, one, to acknowledge what their limitations are, but two, the flexibility of, you don't have to meet with them every week. You don't
Yeah.
even have to meet with them every month. It's just to have a person who could give you a perspective that isn't one who's in your day to day or irregularity within your world, so that they can give you an objective view
Yeah,
and help you
absolutely.
process things.
Yeah, I have a couple people I work with one-on-one right now. And yeah, I think I see both of them about once a month. And, sometimes it's related more to kind of the work realm, and sometimes it's more of the personal realm, but it all, revolves around mindfulness and how they're showing up in those areas of life. And what we talk about, the frame that we use to talk about everything is through the frame of mindfulness.
Yes.
And sometimes we might be doing activities like the values identification activity I talked about, or even soul collage, or even, so I really, just like a therapist would sort of do an assessment, we talk and say like, okay, what are your goals, right?
Yes.
And then I kind of think about, okay, what sort of tools in my, mindfulness toolbox would I want to share with this person?
Mhm.
Always listening to kind of what they're bringing me, because it's more client directed than therapy can be a little bit more therapist directed, because they're working with a diagnosis and a treatment plan and all that.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's collaborative, but I think even more, really my clients in coaching are coming to me with what they feel like is the, the most pertinent thing. And if it's something that I feel like is best suited for a discussion with a different provider, then I'll tell them that. I'm like, I can't,
Yes.
this is not kind of the angle that we can work with, but how about over here? Like, let's look at this part of it and what kinds of things, so then I share resources with them. So a lot of time too, it's kind of just someone who can, curate some of these resources from their knowledge base of like, they know what's out there, rather than someone having to like scroll the internet on their own looking for all this stuff. So books,
Yes.
articles, podcasts, things that I can just put that, give to them right then, as tools.
Yeah. And one of the things that you brought up that you and I have talked about before are the importance of values. And actually, little shameless plug here. I'm starting a men's group for Echo and Athena, and it's a group of men who are going to be committed to each other's success in relationships, in partnerships, in business, and in all phases of life. And the first meeting, when we have it, we are going to be talking about values, current as well as aspirational. and just the idea of it's okay to know where your values are right now, even if they're not aligned with who you want to be. It's just extremely important to be aware of where they are right now. So as I think about that and the impact that had on me, I realized early on one of my top values, not that I wanted it to be this, was convenience. And when I realized that, that allowed me to make a change. um, would you say that values is probably the best first step for people to take in becoming aware of what they are, where they want to go in the practice of mindfulness so that they can evolve more authentically? Or would you say there may be a better first step than looking at the values piece?
I think that, there's always exceptions to every rule, I suppose, but I think generally it does seem to be a pretty good kind of early phase practice for people, because I think it's just such a good, tangible self-awareness practice.
Mhm.
And then I can observe kind of in the process, like how they are relating to themselves as they're going through these values. Because, and I'll tell people, like, there's probably going to be dissonance, right, between um, what, again, your aspirational values and what your actually, like, your everyday behaviors are. And that's
Right.
okay. But like, knowing that is mindfulness. Like, that
Yes.
is awareness building. And you have
Mhm.
to have that, because the opposite of awareness and mindfulness is denial, right? So
Yes.
let's
Yes.
not be in denial. Let's, like, look at what is. We have to have acceptance. That doesn't mean, like, resignation about, like, oh, I guess this is just how it is. This is just how I am. But you have to be able to say, like, this is what it is right now, so that you can know where you want to go, what you want to keep, and what you want to work on. So I think that some people have never taken the time to do, like, kind of a values inventory.
Yeah.
Everybody, I think, has a general idea, I would, for the most part, of what values are, but I
Mhm.
think it runs the gamut of people's direct experience with, like, working with their values. So even if people do a mindful vision board every year and look at their values, still there, it's a changing, fluid document, right? Like, what was
Yes.
important to you at one point, I also then look at, may not be as important to you now. But then I look at this kind of like a life areas form that I have people kind of map values onto. So as a parent, like, kindness is, yes, you've identified that that's really important in parenting. Maybe, like, it's also important at work, but even more so, like, the most important value at work is uh, authenticity, or what have you. But that way too, you can kind of be looking at, like, okay, what are my core values, and, like, which ones are really ones that I want to focus on growing and moving in alignment towards in different areas of my life. So I think
Yeah.
that is a really rich activity. But it also doesn't have to be so serious. Like, I do these mindful vision boarding workshops with, like, teams of, like, there's wine and cheese, and it's like, it can be fun and chatty and, like,
Oh,
social.
yeah.
None of this stuff has to be so uber serious, right? And I guess they're in mindfulness can look like that sometimes, because, on the front of the yoga journal magazine or whatever, it's just this very, like, stoic yogi. I think that's what turns people off to it sometimes, because they're like, oh, I'm not this, like, perfectly devout, serious, yogi. I can't really, this world isn't for me, this meditation world. But mindfulness is for everybody. It is just aliveness. It's awareness of our aliveness. And let's just, like, get into it. Let's play with it. And that's the creative.
Yes.
That's just what I like to do with the creative aspect of it. Is it's like, oh, can you experience it here? How about here? How about in this way? And then the more that you can realize opportunities are everywhere to tune into that, then you can kind of create um, your own mindful life map, basically, right?
Yeah.
Like, what are going to be the things for me that I do pretty on the regular to
Yeah, it's like, let's stop being so damn serious all the damn time,
mm,
and let's allow the joyfulness, the playfulness
Yeah.
to come in, because here's the people want to have fun. We're on this planet for, I know varying degrees, but let's just say roughly 85 years. And that's not a long time in the scope of the universe. And everything is so serious. And I know I probably sound like the Joker right now, but it really is so serious all the time. Why can't we allow awareness, the practice of life, finding our direction, knowing our authenticity? Why can't it be playful and fun? I mean, it doesn't have to be. I think there's always seems to be one person in the group who kind of they get uncomfortable with it and they make it mockingly funny as opposed to playful and fun. But truly, like, let's have some fun with this. Everything else is serious. Let's let the experience of being authentic be something that's fun for once. So I
Yes,
absolutely
as
resonate
you
with
get
it.
out of your own way and you're less worried about what other people think, like you can go hug a tree. You can cut out images with scissors and use a glue stick and paste it on and have a deck of cards that, like, again, none of this is capitalistically productive. None of this is going to make you more money. But will it indirectly? I don't know.
Yes.
Maybe because you'll be like a more emotionally intelligent person with greater reserves of energy and more loving kindness to give. I think that there are a lot of employers who would like that type of employee. So
Mhm.
it's not always an easy sell for me when I go to organizations and I have my like little bag of mindfulness tricks of like, okay, but what's our bottom line? How is this going to help us? But if you invest the time in your people and you care about their well-being enough to allow them to have some playtime, right? Some
Mhm.
mindful playtime where they can explore some practices that they can implement at work and at home and take little nuggets from here and there and have start to shift the culture. That is going to bring you some good stuff down the road.
And the bottom line is this, I do believe it absolutely does contribute to that. And some of the figures that I've looked at is, employee disengagement has risen over, it was bad 10 years ago. It's now at roughly the 80 to 85% threshold if you look at the varying degrees of it. And a company, an organization can only solve so much of that. A lot of that has to do with the pressure, the struggle that people are having day to day. So, as they are able to find ways to fill their own cup and to be able to show up authentically, to be able to show up um, in a way that is open and collaborative and at least healing, it has a definite secondary effect on the productivity, on the profitability, whether
Yeah.
you're a solopreneur or you're part of a corporate entity, it definitely plays out. The happier people are, the greater work that they do because it's coming from a totally different place. So,
I
absolutely.
agree. And there is plenty of evidence out there. Been lots of research that's been done about mindfulness in the workplace. There's, Search Inside Yourself is the Google mindfulness program. Like people are catching on. There's a lot of, at the same time, I think there is that sort of like, I don't know, corporate commodified mindfulness.
Right.
And so I
Right.
always want to, just bring I want to humanize it
Yeah.
and make sure that we don't forget that it can't always be just one size fits all.
Yeah. There a lot of people are, again, they're working from a place of stress, of pressure, of having to produce and have expectations. And so they want A to B.
Mhm.
A to B only lasts so long. But if A to B to C to D produces E, you can't dismantle. that is easy. And I hope that helps people get a picture. It's essentially building the strong foundation or reinforcing the foundation of what has been built so that it can continue to grow and be stronger and then more profitable, obviously. But
Yeah, that's one of my goals for the next year, is to put some offerings in place for businesses and organizations that would be maybe like quarterly offerings with touch bases in between, so that they can kind of really get the experience of an ongoing practice, kind of just this like golden thread running through the year, of and trying out lots of different practices. So yeah, I always have little things in the hopper thinking of.
that's awesome. Well, last question.
Okay.
And then I know you've got things going on this afternoon, but last question so that we can help wrap this episode up for our listeners is essentially, if someone's hearing this and saying, okay, we've heard a lot of different aspects of the mindfulness journey, techniques, tools, programs, but if they were saying, Katy, can you please just distill down one piece of advice if I'm going to begin this journey towards mindfulness and authenticity? What would that first step be, in your opinion?
I think that, I mean, I feel like I'm sometimes an internal optimist, sometimes maybe not, but this is an internal optimist answer. I think that they've already taken the first step if they're asking that question.
Mhm.
So I guess I would just validate that, like, they're already showing up for themselves by having listened to the podcast to this point, right? So if you're still listening, you've been absorbing all of this and been curious about it. And maybe you have questions. Maybe you're not sure where to go from here. If you want to dip more into kind of my world of mindfulness and offerings, like, one nice thing that you can do as a start is to read my mindfulness newsletter that I have every month that I send out. It's called Attunement. I have it centers around a theme related to mindfulness every month. And then I share a creative mindfulness practice related to the theme, and then a song related to the theme, either one of mine, because I'm a singer-songwriter, or somebody else that's much more famous than me and did a great song. So then you'll also in that email find upcoming events. So, a couple first steps, if you're local, especially to Columbus, Ohio, certainly, try just to come to something, to try out a workshop. If you're not local, still join. I would love you to join the email list so that you can be just getting that mindfulness content, because then that it takes it from the periphery back into the driver's seat, when you get that email in your inbox and you're like, oh yeah, what have I done with mindfulness in the last month? And so you can kind of maybe be thinking about that theme for the month. And you can always email me as well if you have questions about, like, oh, like, is there a book that you'd recommend or something, like, because everyone's going to have, a slightly different interest about, like, where they want to go within this kind of giant, space of mindfulness. So I'm happy to share any resources specifically, but I think that, I mean, one of the first things that I did, I think, was just start reading and, listening to podcasts and start investigating in my own community what was going on, kind of who are the movers and shakers in the space that, like, offered sound baths or, forest bathing or other kinds of creative arts-based options. Finding a community can be also a beautiful first step. So, here in Upper Arlington, now we have the Bee Sanctuary. My friend Deborah Bosner is the owner, and I'm the co-founder. And we have just expanded our space, so we're able to offer more programming. And in fact, tonight I'm offering a free, well, not tonight if you're listening to this later, but now we're like 2 days after the election. So I'm offering a free sound bath and gathering. And so, we just want to be there for our community. And there are going to be places like that wherever you are. I hope you might have to drive to them depending, but I think it's just kind of asking around. And I have been I've been the recipient of so much good flowing my way, I think, because I've just been ready for it. And I don't mean that in a cheesy manifestation way, because I'm not sure that I believe all that. But I think what I am looking for, it kind of shows up, and it's there. And I think that I would just encourage people not to give up and to keep looking for those resources. But okay, this is a very long answer. The very last thing I would say is to walk outside and to look up at the sky, look down at the ground, look all around you, and be aware that you're breathing, and take it all in, and then go from there. That's a good start.
And if you're looking to connect, the website is Katy Oberle Creative, and that's KatyOberle creative.com. And that's where they could sign up for your newsletter, correct?
Yep, absolutely.
And you could also find her on Instagram as well. Katy, you are rad. I absolutely always love our conversations. And thank you for courageously and authentically sharing your story and the impacts that the practices you have and that you help other people's learn to integrate into their life and all points in between. Just appreciate you so deeply, my friend. You're a great example of courage and strength and growth in the human experience. So appreciate you. Thank you for being on. And we cannot wait to have you back someday.
Thanks so much, Brian. This was awesome. Thanks for being you.
Thank you. Well, we will talk to you all on our next episode. Make sure you check out Katy's Instagram and connect with her and follow with her there, and look up her website and go ahead, get on that newsletter. You will not be disappointed. To all of you out there, live authentically and let's go.